Hey, what is up guys? So we are going to be doing the advanced section of deck building. Now if you haven't already watched the first video, which is basic deck building, I do recommend you guys to check that out first before actually viewing this video. I'll put a link below in the description box, as well as have an annotation that you can just click on and it'll send you on your way to watch the first video. So now that we've actually built our deck, regardless of what deck it is, we actually should be playtesting. Playtesting meaning you're going to go ahead and take it into a game or duel against some of your friends and see what are the strengths and weaknesses of your deck, and also check out what the bad matchups, meaning against a certain deck, you might always lose against a certain deck, and you might also win against a certain deck, majority of the time. Just because you lose to a deck once or twice does not mean you have a bad matchup. A bad matchup for, let's say for example, this deck right here, which is Agents, would be something like Evil Swarms, because that deck does not allow you to special summon 5 or higher monsters, and this deck definitely requires you to special summon a bunch of level 5 or higher monsters to actually secure victory. So first off, before we talk about your bad matchups, let's go ahead and talk about cards that can be dead. Now I don't want you guys to get confused with cards that are dead versus something like a bad hand. Like for example, bad hands happen in Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, if you open up with 3 Master Hyperion and 3 Mystical Shine Ball, yeah, that's a pretty bad hand. That doesn't mean these are, cards that, are always dead in your hand. Maybe, 3 Hyperion for you is too much. Maybe a lot of times when you're playing the game, you notice that when you lose, you always happen to have too many Master Hyperions in your hand. This card is an excellent card, but, it just might have not worked out in that certain circumstance where you just didn't have the ability to special summon this boss monster over here like Master Hyperion. But, there are other times where, like I said, you just have bad hands. Yeah, don't get that confused with cards that are dead. So what I want you guys to be able to do essentially is to keep playtesting with the deck and see what you happen to have in your hand when you lose. That way you can kind of think about, maybe I'm playing too many copies of this card. Maybe you keep on dueling and you notice every time you lose, you happen to have 2 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon in your hand, or 1 copy of Mystical Space Typhoon and 1 creature swap, and you just don't happen to have the monster count. Now, this is probably not going to be the scenario with this deck, where you wouldn't have enough monsters for a card like creature swap, but, depending on your specific deck, that might be the case. You might not have access to, using creature swap all the time because you don't play a deck that has a high monster count, and you might not be playing against certain decks that happen to play lots of back row. I know this format heavy is gone, so depending on your locals or the area that you play in, you have to take that into consideration as well. Depending on what the players are playing, you might not need to even main deck any MST. If they're all playing Chaos Dragons, hey, you might not even need to put this card in. So depending on what you're playing against, keep that in mind as well. So next up, I want to talk about bad matchups, meaning that against these certain decks, you always lose against them. Now we'll go over some common decks, as well as what are common side deck cards to actually use to actually beat some of these decks. Now some of these will not be applicable to this certain deck. Like for example, a card like Empyrean Iron Wall will not work in a deck like Agents. Like you probably would not want to side deck this card, but I'm just going to be talking about cards that you can actually main deck in your deck if it doesn't hurt you at all and it just hurts your opponent. So let's go ahead and get into some of these examples. So maybe against 6 Samurais, you have a bad matchup against 6 Samurais, you're playing a little bit of a slower deck, 6 Samurais just happen to be a bad matchup. There are other cards that you can use to just simply get rid of, the effect that 6 Samurai Shien has. An excellent card would be something like Tsukiyomi. Tsukiyomi would be an excellent card just to summon and get rid of Shien straight up by putting it face down. Shien does not have that good of defense, it's only 1400. Unfortunately, Tsukiyomi doesn't have the strength to actually run over, but still, it puts Shien face down, then you can Dark Hole, and then Shien cannot activate its effect. One deck that is actually really popular right now is Evil Swarms, and this deck over here is an excellent example of a deck that would have a bad matchup against a deck like Evil Swarms, simply because, Evil Swarms is a deck where it doesn't allow you to special summon 5 or higher, and basically to make a lot of plays in this deck, you're going to need to actually bring out, high-level monsters, and Ophion won't allow you to do that. So, this will be a deck that can technically lose to Ophion, so cards that will get rid of Ophion are actually cards like Breakthrough Skill. Well, that doesn't get rid of him, but it gets rid of his effect, so same thing. Cards like Neospatian Grand Mole are great cards. I've seen people, if you're playing a deck that can utilize, water monsters, maybe Penguin Soldier can be an option for you. I've seen some of the OCG players playing Mermails that have actually sided in Penguin Soldier. More popularly they actually side deck in Raikou a lot. This card is probably one of the most versatile cards that you can actually use because it's just a flip effect that can speed up your deck by not only sending 3 cards from your deck to the graveyard, but destroying any card on the field, meaning you can actually destroy your own if you happen to need to destroy your own. But basically, Raikou gets rid of Ophion, it gets rid of other back row that can technically hurt you. Maybe in the side deck, people always side deck Light Imprisoning Mirror. You can definitely side deck some of these cards. But like I said, you can actually main deck some of these cards if it doesn't hurt your deck. Now, before there was a card called Evolus Lagia, which doesn't really see too much play anymore. Dino Rabbit or Macro Rabbit has kind of phased out, especially since Macrocosmos is at 1 right now. The thing with Lagia is that you basically need to get rid of Lagia real fast, otherwise they're going to maintain control over the game, and you can simply lose because of that. A card that was real popular that people were playing at that time was Soul Taker. Basically, just you get to destroy one face of monster opponent control, and their opponent gains 1,000 life points. Now, the reason why some players were doing Soul Taker instead of a card, say, like Smashing Ground, is because Soul Taker allows you to actually select what card that you want to actually get rid of, plus the effect that then your opponent gains 1,000 life points actually makes cards miss the timing. Something like Elemental Hero the Shining or the Chaos Dragon deck, Light Pulsar Dragon, that will also force Light Pulsar Dragon to miss the timing. So this card can be utilized against a lot of different decks, whereas Smashing Ground just might be only good against, say, something like the Dino Rabbit deck, whereas Soul Taker would be great against not only Dino Rabbit, but it would be great against something like Chaos Dragon. So this is an excellent card that you can main deck if you happen to have a bad matchup against a certain deck. Next up, XYZ Encore. This is a really good card to actually get rid of Ophion. This is probably one of the most problematic cards, probably the card that actually shuts down your deck faster than anything in this format, and this card just gets rid of it real fast, and your opponent can't chain anything in response to this card's activation, which is really awesome. But Breakthrough Skill is an excellent card also, and it stops a lot of decks. So keep in mind, when you're choosing some of these cards that you're main decking because of your bad matchups, it's always good to have certain cards that are good against a lot of different decks. Whereas Breakthrough Skill, this is pretty much good against everything, whereas XYZ Encore, your opponent might not even XYZ at all. Maybe they're playing something like Black Wings, where they really don't need to XYZ at all. Whereas, Breakthrough Skill, you can hit cards like Blizzard, and then they have a 1300 monster in attack position that you can just run over or something like that. Next up, any deck that OTKs an excellent card. Maybe you happen to be playing like a slower deck. Agents are a relatively fast deck that you can usually push between turn 2 to 3 real easy. But if you're playing a slower deck, maybe something like X Sabers, you need a few turns basically to get your OTKs off most of the time. Something that is too fast for you, something like the Hieratic Dragons, what you can do is actually side deck cards like, Effect Failure is a great card, that can definitely ruin some of their plays, but, sometimes it's not bad to have a Swift Scarecrow. This is a very popular deck in the Plant Elemental Dragons because it's also an Earth monster, so keep in mind, maybe you don't want to run Battle Fader because Battle Fader is dark and it gets banished during the end phase, but maybe you're playing a certain deck that can utilize banished cards, so keep that in mind as well. If you're, playing a deck that usually loses to OTK decks, Swift Scarecrow or Battle Fader are excellent cards. Also, Trigodia is a great card as well, especially after you activate a card like Maxi. Like Maxi would be an excellent card against the Hieratic Dragons, but there are some certain decks that don't really need to push, and maybe Swift Scarecrow can just protect you from those life points sometimes, and it can definitely help you out. Next up, anything that's like has an alternate win condition, like for example some Exodia decks, some Final Countdown decks. A lot of those decks rely on a lot of traps. Maybe you happen to keep on losing against Final Countdown. This is a very annoying deck, and a lot of decks simply just don't have the cards in the main deck to actually face it. That's why it is an annoying deck to deal with for some decks. So a card like Royal Decree would absolutely shut them down. And this deck right here, hey, look at this deck list right here. There is only one trap. You can definitely just, if you don't want to run the Treasure Trap Hole, you can definitely just swap it out, or depending on what your deck you're playing, if you don't play that many traps, you can also weigh your options by looking at it as in, you have a bunch of traps, but it doesn't matter because if you successfully activate one Royal Decree, you shut their deck down, and you might shut down maybe 1/4 or 1/5 of your deck, but you've shut pretty much all their cards in their deck, except for maybe like a Final Countdown and maybe their Swift Scarecrows or Battle Faders or whatever they are playing. So weigh your options on that as well. But for this, deck over here, Agents, they usually don't play too many traps. So Royal Decree would be an excellent card against a bird deck, or even just main decking it against a lot of different decks because, Heavy is technically gone this format. Next up, the Plant Dragons or Dragon Ruler deck. you know, most of them really need to be able to banish cards, although there are times where they'll just make Black Rose Dragon to get rid of the Imperial Iron Wall. But if they don't happen to have the option to do so, you can actually push really hard and actually game them real fast. So Imperial Iron Wall makes it so their cards cannot be removed from play, which hurts them a lot, actually. This is probably one of the best side deck cards against them, but usually they'll have the MST ready to go. So what you can actually do is you can run a card like Kaiku in the main deck or side deck, and you can actually have a better matchup against the deck, because it makes it so only your opponent cannot remove cards from play from either player's graveyard. So what that allows you to do is that still allows you to have your you know, boss monsters. It still allows you to have access to your cards where you shut down your opponent's plays. So that's always good in Yu-Gi-Oh, where basically you have some type of effect where it only stops your opponent from doing something. And lastly, I wanted to mention Raikou once again. Against a lot of decks, Raikou is probably one of the best side deck options, simply because it can get rid of any back row that you know, you have to deal with. In the OCG, a few of them have been doing Raikou. They've been side decking out the card troopers, and they've been doing Raikou because you still have access to the Debris Dragon plays with some of the plants. But you can actually take out the card troopers or whatever card you want to take out and just run Raikou, because Raikou can hit Imperial Iron Wall. It can hit cards like Vanity's Emptiness, which are all very popular cards that people like to side deck against the dragon or plant ruler deck. So Raikou is probably one of the most versatile cards, like I mentioned before, because it gets rid of Lagia, gets rid of Ophion, it gets rid of Xian, and it's just really fast because, you know, it allows you to mill cards, and you can destroy anything. I mean, you could argue that it's kind of slow because you have to set it and you have to wait, but it's pretty quick because your opponent can't really respond to it, whereas these other cards like Imperial Iron Wall, they can chain MST, they can chain MST, and they can, you know, react. To where Raikou, it's very difficult to actually be able to react on a set card. There's very few cards that just say, you know, let me just banish a face-down monster or something like that. There's no one to cross out, but realistically no one really main decks that or side decks that card at the moment, but who knows, maybe in the future it'll be good again, because at one point that card was actually at 1 because it was too good. But I hope this helps you guys get a better idea on as far as what to do on your side deck. But there's also one thing that I want to mention as far as advanced deck building. Always play test the deck before you bring it to a tournament or whatever you're doing with the deck that you want to test it out with. Is to actually test some of the hands. What you can do in DevPro is hit this button here called Shuffle, and what that does is it shuffles the your deck over here, and you can look at the first 6 cards over here and decide if that is a playable hand or not. Like, this would be a fantastic first turn right here. I can get rid of my opponent's back row if they happen to have a monster. I can special summon Striker and then go Venus, and then go for a double Gotchi or whatever scenario, whatever carding to make for the right situation. I have access to it, so you can just keep on hitting shuffle and just checking out if that is a good hand or not. Like this hand over here, I do happen to have Gore, so that's pretty awesome. It lets me at least survive, and I have a TG Striker that I can set and search for Werewolf, so I can have some monster cycling going on until I actually get some of my cards, and then I can drop a Dark Arm Dragon on them later on, because this is dark and Werewolf is also a dark card. I also have a video tutorial on how to test your deck for consistency, so I'll also put that down below in the description box, because I know some players, maybe you're going to a tournament, you don't have access to a computer and you want to test your deck. That is a good way to test your deck, is basically shuffling your cards and then drawing 6 cards, but it'll go through an in-depth explanation on the video down below in the description box. But this will help you guys build your deck, and like I said, just because you finish your deck does not mean it's done. It's always good to keep on playing your deck and changing little things to make it a little bit better. And always, it's good to have cards in your main deck that you can actually use against certain decks that if you happen to have a bad matchup. Like I said, guys, the Evil Storm deck is going to be a deck that's really popular. So this deck, for example, would have kind of a bad matchup against it. So cards like Raikou would be a great card in the actual main deck, or something like Breakthrough Skill, which is a fantastic card anyways. And what's awesome with a card like Breakthrough Skill is just because you play Breakthrough Skill, doesn't mean you actually have to take out Treacherous Trap Hole, because Breakthrough Seal can still be banished, and then you won't have any trap cards in your graveyard as well. So that's just one way you can actually utilize some of the cards. But like I said, keep in mind, don't run some cards that would actually hurt you too. Like Imperial Iron Wall will not help you. It can actually hurt you a lot. So keep in mind, if you're going to main deck some of the cards that people normally side deck for your bad matchups, or for certain reasons why you are main decking them, keep in mind to always test and see what you have in your hand when you are losing, and maybe you can take out an MST if you always lose with double MST in your hand or something like that. But hope this helps you guys out, and by the way, check the links in the description if you want to check out other the videos that I mentioned. But thanks for watching, have a great day. Asian Eyes signing out.